Hi, welcome to The Road Least Traveled. My name is Suli and I'm your host. In this podcast, I share with you what I've learned from my journey of self-awareness and spiritual awakening, and also some simple and practical tips to help you in your own journey. So stay with me. Let's work this thing out together. In my previous episode, I mentioned some signs of spiritual awakening, but because each of us is on a unique journey, there's no one size fits all. So I'll tell you a bit about how my awakening came about, and I hope that it helps you in your journey. You see, I've been emotionally isolated all my life, ever since I can remember. The isolation that wasn't my choice to begin with gradually became my unconscious choice. So I was stuck in that low frequency of believing I was unlovable and unworthy of anyone's attention, time, and effort. And it just snowballed from there. I attracted similar low frequency circumstances and people, and we just fed off each other. So that dynamic grew stronger and further reinforced my belief that had become the story of my life. But it got to a point where the feeling of aloneness became unbearable, and I wanted to change that narrative. I searched everywhere for something to fill that need to connect with someone, and that desperation repelled mentally healthy people from me. At first, I didn't even know I was stuck in that low frequency. And when I came to realize that that was the issue, I had no idea how to change it. It felt even worse than when I didn't know. But once you come out of that shell and you have a genuine intention to grow spiritually, you just can't go back, you just have to march on. So one day I decided to try something different. Instead of resisting that desperate feeling and searching externally, instead of trying to earn someone's love or friendship, I did quite the opposite. I further isolated myself physically and emotionally, living off the grid like a hermit. Because somehow there was a small grain of intuition in me that told me to move away from everything that was my life. And so began my journey with a lot of stumbling around, experimenting, unlearning and relearning. It was a very confusing time because my whole life I'd been told who I was. And yet, deep down, I just knew I wasn't that person I was gaslighted into believing. Gradually, even circumstances began isolating me from society and the world at large. The pandemic played a part in it, but there were other circumstances as well that also further isolated me. And then I stopped going into social media altogether and then lost contact with most of my friends. It was only much later that it occurred to me that for spiritual awakening to happen, you need a lot of space. And the more isolated you are, the more powerful the spiritual awakening can be. Now, this is not for everyone because not everyone can deal with hardcore isolation. For me, I'd already had a lifetime of being isolated ever since I was a child. So being all alone in the wilderness wasn't scary at all. If you're really serious about your spiritual journey and you intuitively know that you can handle it, then I'd say isolation is very effective because it's the best way to give you perspective. But keep in mind that this is not forever, yeah? So don't worry that you might become the crazy person living in a hut in the forest. It's just for as long as it takes, whatever that means to you. Where I live, it's a hill that's completely exposed to the elements. And at sunrise and sunset, and every hour in between, I see a different view of the different mountains, the shadows on their curves, the bigness of the sky, sometimes a flat blue, sometimes with brilliant white puffs of clouds. And at night, the stars come out to the sound of cicadas. It's truly beautiful. But as beautiful as nature is, it's just as harsh. Before I truly understood why I was so angry, sad, and desperate, I used to scream and swear at the sky when the storms were so merciless and relentless. I fought with all my might one afternoon, standing on a ladder trying to hook back a heavy 10-foot blind that had been unhinged by the wind. The blind flapped wildly like a sail on an old ship in a storm and almost knocked me off the ladder. And then I realized I was the unhinged one for fighting something so much more powerful. Even though I was powered by a lifetime of anger and sadness, I ended up sitting on the ground, drenched in rainwater, and I said, okay, okay, you win. The next day, I woke up to the view of the same mountains, the sun warming my face. Birds were playing in midair, showing off their dance, and the clouds had become thin wisps, lightened by the storm of the previous day, all of them acting as though nothing happened. So I told nature, if you think it's over, you are so wrong. And so for another day, I mentally prepared to fight whatever was to come. I kept fighting until one day when my whole life came crashing down. All the pillars of normal life, like career, relationship, friendships, family, all fell apart. I'll spare you the details, but suffice to say, it was the darkest time of my life. The people closest to me were either pretending they didn't see what had been going on for decades, or they really didn't see. And those that had been benefiting from me couldn't run fast enough. I was shocked, disappointed, saddened. I was angry. And while everything crumbled around me, my aunt, whom I was close to, died. My cousin, whom I found great comfort and support from, also died. She was only 37. My dog was diagnosed with a serious terminal disease, the C word. But fortunately, a few agonizing weeks later, I was relieved to find that it was a false alarm. It was something milder and more curable. But you see, all that happened within just a couple of months. And on top of everything, all the deep rooted childhood traumas surfaced all at once. I spent whole days and nights reading and watching literally thousands of articles and videos. And that was the first time I learned about the dark night of the soul. And ironically, it can be the worst time to look to friends for support because unless they've been through the dark night of the soul themselves, they won't understand. And they'll just give bad advice that might delay your process. But what you have to keep in mind is that when you reach your lowest point, you must know your limit. If you're close to taking your own life, and I hope you don't reach that point, but if you do, please call someone immediately. It doesn't matter who you call. The point is to break your downward spiral, and it buys you some time to rebalance. After that, when you feel you can handle it, just let the pain beat you up until you're so tired that you discover how to surrender. Surrendering isn't just a solution to end the pain. Surrendering is not the end, it's just the beginning. It starts a chain reaction towards gratitude, forgiveness, and self love. The moment I surrendered, a thought suddenly entered my mind out of nowhere, and it told me to pick up the broom. I was too exhausted to question it, so I obediently picked up the broom and started sweeping the floor. As I was sweeping and crying, another thought came to me, and I instinctively turned around. What I saw, I will never forget. There was this huge rainbow, a complete arc stretching from one end of the horizon to another. I stared at it for several moments without a single thought. I was just feeling it. It was so very beautiful, so soft, so kind, so loving, watching over me silently the whole time. I'd never seen anything so big in all my life, and it looked like it was saying, "You want a big rainbow hug?" Well, that didn't last because at some point the ruminating, the negative thoughts, the anger and sadness returned. So I continued sweeping the floor. I didn't know what else to do. I know it sounds silly, but that was the first time I realized that something as simple as sweeping the floor can be an act of self love. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to the spa for a massage, holidays in luxury resorts where you're pampered day and night. It's nice to have someone else serve you, but you know what? There's no magic in it. The magic is in doing a ridiculously simple thing for yourself, by yourself. Not a big thing, but a simple one, and be completely focused on it. Even a shower, if you treat it like an act of self love rather than just getting yourself clean, can be life changing. So when you feel sad, do something for yourself. Something small, something simple. Or just lie on the grass and look at clouds. The key word is simplicity. I used to be the kind of person who looked at clouds and get annoyed when the shape I liked started shifting, like when the poodle puppy floated into the widening mouth of a dragon. Such an overachiever I was that if I was a cloud, I'd try harder to be a better cloud. Nowadays, I can lie under my mangosteen tree and watch them for hours, letting them be whatever they want to be. You see, the point of watching clouds is not even to watch them, it's just to be with them. That's when they cease to be dogs or cats or mythical creatures or faces of people. That's when we don't create stories to think about and to judge whether it's a good cloud or a bad cloud, a pretty one or a disheveled one. And that was when I accidentally discovered a way to meditate without meditating in a formal way, where you sit cross legged in a silent room with candles and stuff. Now, there's no doubt that meditation is a really good way to gain clarity. But if you can't get into it yet, just start by watching clouds or stare at a beautiful view or take a walk in the woods. But do all that without thinking what kind of tree it is, what species of bird or insect, because that takes you out of the meditative state and back into the material world where everything has a name and a set of man made conditions and rules. It's just that staying in a meditative state requires awareness. So, the first thing we need to do is to try to be aware of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Without that awareness, it's easy to be taken down the rabbit hole. And before you realize it, you've been traveling down the spiral for hours. So, catching yourself at the entrance of the rabbit hole is the first step we need to make. It's helpful to remember that it's the ego that fights with awareness because the ego doesn't want you to awaken. Don't you find that you may have been trying to awaken for many years, but somehow you get pulled back into a state of autopilot, doing things you've been conditioned to do, letting your fears control you, and ruminating over the past and future, and not being fully present? That is the work of the ego, because it was hardwired in us from thousands of years ago to protect us from physical harm, and now it just can't stop. Even if there's no danger of us being stomped to death by a woolly mammoth or be eaten by a giant bird, the ego doesn't know how to relax, and it has to create drama to keep itself occupied. To me, the job of the ego is to keep us physically safe. If it tampers in the area of emotional and spiritual growth, then it becomes a hindrance, which is why it's important to be totally honest with ourselves about which thoughts and actions are ego based and which are for spiritual growth. My battle with the ego was fierce and ugly, but I'm pleased to tell you that the battle ended amicably, and me and my ego are now in a much better relationship. It's like we're friends who trust and respect each other's opinions. We communicate, we discuss, we give and take. So honor your ego as a protective bodyguard against physical danger. Don't kill it. It's useful under certain circumstances. Instead, train this bodyguard to have a bit more finesse and to be more discerning about when to fight and when to allow your spiritual side to take the lead. We can train our ego to work together in harmony with our spiritual side. And to do that, we need to know which of our thoughts, actions, and emotions are governed by our ego. It can be hard at first, but you'll get the hang of it because all you need is practice to know the difference between what's ego based and what's integrity based. You can start by questioning every thought, every action to what someone says to you, and every emotion that comes to you. And after a while, you begin to know the difference. Why did you feel that way when so and so said such and such? Is it because it hit a nerve? What nerve did it hit? Can you improve yourself in that area? Or is it because it's untrue what they said about you? If so, then just be proud that you're not that terrible person they think you are instead of getting upset over it. Their misjudgment of you is their problem, not yours. And every time you decide to do something, just ask yourself, is it ego based or is it for a good cause? When you help someone, ask yourself who you're really doing it for. Now, there's nothing wrong in doing it for yourself as long as you don't lie to yourself, as long as you don't resent the people you helped. If you're donating to charity because it makes you feel good rather than doing it purely to help others, it's okay as long as you know it. Because self-love begins with being honest with yourself. Don't bother about what others think of you. Because, and I'll tell you a secret, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and hold your head up high, you can look at anyone and hold your head up high. Well, that seems like a really good place to stop, don't you think? I hope you got something of value out of this. In the meantime, do take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care for now. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you found this helpful, please share it.